Now with time, many of those engineers decided, you know what, this is something we can do ourselves. Why are we doing work for others? We want to build our own products, and we can compete on those. We know how to compete on those.
That was the voice of Waleed Alballaa, founding GP at Sukna Ventures. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Waleed Alballaa. Waleed is a technologist-turned-investor with a proven track record across global and MENA markets spanning semiconductors, wireless, mobility, e-government. As a founding general partner at Sukna Ventures, he backs early-stage tech-driven startups across the region. Prior to Sukna, Waleed co-founded STV, one of the MENA region's largest VC funds, and led pivotal initiatives at the e-government services software firm Ilm, including launching the firm's first business sector and founding its corporate venture arm. Waleed's earlier career includes high-tech development roles at Cadence Design, Conexant, Skyworks Solutions, and Microsoft in the US. He holds a master's in computer science from Oregon Health and Science University and a bachelor's in computer science from King Saud University. Beyond investing, Waleed serves on multiple boards and actively mentors founders. He also co-founded the Saudi Venture Capital and Private Equity Association and the Business Analysis Association Group, where he currently serves as vice chairman. He's a committed technology optimist, passionate about the ecosystem in the region and fueling innovation for a better future for all of us. And it's a very interesting conversation on this topic and other topics, including the potential for deep tech in Saudi and in the region, and all the interesting initiatives happening in the Saudi ecosystem. Enjoy. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Waleed Alballaa, general partner at Sukna Ventures. It's my pleasure to host Waleed today. He is an icon of the Saudi ecosystem. I'm always seeing his insights online, in conferences, etc. I'm looking forward to have a deep discussion with him today. Welcome, Waleed.
Thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Waleed. Waleed, you started your life as a software engineer, and yet you ended up as a technology investor. Can you tell us about how that turn of life happened?
Yeah, actually, there were many turns until I got where I am today. But basically, it all started from a single thread, which was um, during my youth times. This is like in the mid '90s. I was looking at the region and specifically Saudi, where I live, and there was this paradox that wasn't, sitting well with me. And basically, I was thinking, why did we have all the talent? We had the capital, we had good regulatory frameworks, and the policymaker that actually wanted to uh, make the country progress and grow. And yet, we were not as competitive at the time with other economies around the world. And I thought about this hard. I didn't have much information. I was still young, foolish. And I thought it was because we were missing one key ingredient, which is technology. And decided want to get into computer science and wanted to work in the US, where, the hub of all things technology, and bring that missing ingredient and complete the recipe for what I thought would make the country a much more competitive economically. So that's how I got into computer science. Luckily, I was already in love with computers and programming. Started programming since before becoming a teenager. So it aligned, and so I got to the US in a very interesting timing. It was just before the internet bubble happened, the year 2000, and I stayed there for another 8 years until the global financial crisis peaked, and got to see how the ecosystem in the US, how the technology sector actually was was going through all of these patches of busts and booms, right? And it was very eye opening for me because it actually showed me that it wasn't really about technology. It wasn't about the know-how. That was actually a commodity because during that period, there was also the big wave of outsourcing to India and other countries. So it wasn't the knowledge itself. It was actually the environment. It was the ecosystem. It was the resilience of the technology communities there as well. So towards the end of my stay there, I decided that I actually wanted to switch from my role as a software engineer slash computer scientist because I was working more on the algorithm side in the semiconductor space and later at Microsoft to more of an
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem catalyst. And I decided to come back and work for a startup. It was a startup at the time. Now it's considered part of big tech here in Saudi. It was called Ilm. And basically, they had this crazy idea of implementing e-government in Saudi, which no one at the time thought was, a rational thing to do. But lo and behold, it happened, and now it's one of the most valuable companies in the stock market here in Saudi. But that kind of experience is what I wanted. Wanted to be on the change management part, the ecosystem building, and there at Ilm was where I got the opportunity to get into VC through a corporate VC model, and then started my VC journey from there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you kind of just in your normal career progression ended up in their corporate VC arm, and then it took off. And didn't you hesitate? I mean, you'd spent 8 years in the U.S., working for Microsoft in their headquarters at Redmond. You didn't think, I should continue my career here, maybe move to the Valley or the Bay Area or something like that. Didn't you feel it was a bit of a risk at that time?
It was definitely a risk, right? I finally made it, got into a marquee name, and lots of doors open after that. But if you think about the opportunity of building, of being more competitive, I think the region for me presented a much bigger opportunity. Yes, the risk was much higher, but the reward and the scope of things I can do, which was also much, much, much higher. And I was lucky to get into Elm at the right time. But that was the thinking behind it was, maybe the US is actually the center of the universe, the technology universe, but that doesn't mean that opportunity doesn't exist elsewhere. In fact, for me as someone from the region, the opportunity to actually make a bigger impact was much higher at MENA in MENA.
Cool. And after the corporate VC, back in 2016, you were part of the founding team of STV. STV, of course, is one of the biggest regional funds, has a big impact. So, can you tell me more about that founding experience with the team there and what STV, their mission is, and what the impact has been?
Sure. To talk about that experience, I think we need to take a step back and discuss what I was actually doing with the corporate VC arm at Elm. This was part of our growth
Yeah,
strategy and got to a point where they needed to think about inorganic growth. How do they scale through, the
mm,
rest of the market, not just with the products that they were building. And I proposed a corporate VC with the support of management. The CEO back then was Dr. Abdulrahman Al-Jadai. So having Dr. Abdulrahman as my CEO was actually a very lucky thing for me because he was himself very much into the startup ecosystem. He was one of the early angels in Kareem and many other startups at the time. So it wasn't very hard for me to convince him of the potential of startups and how could that contribute to the growth of Elm. So the idea that we wanted to do was not just focus on the financial part of the investment, but also creating those synergies between the startups and Ilm by opening up the assets that Ilm has, whether it's APIs, distribution, access, and so on. and making ilm instead of competing through products only, but giving a platform for startups to build on top of ilm, similar to what happened with other companies in the US, whether it's Microsoft, Salesforce, and others. So that was the idea, right? And when I
Hmm.
got the opportunity to uh, work with Abdurrahman Talabzoni later on, Abdurrahman, after was at Google in Mountain View, and he came back to Saudi as well. So when he came back, he was talking with a telecom company, the biggest one probably in the region, Saudi Telecom, STC, and they also had an existential issue that they were thinking about, which is, as a telecom, if they didn't actually figure out how to become relevant in the digital economy, then they could be relegated into being a utility company, just dump pipes everywhere. And to their credit, they saw this very early. They were one of the earliest people, entities to see this, and they had already brought in a team from Iris Capital, which came out of Orange, a French telecom, and they worked with them on their first VC fund, STC Ventures. And this was started in 2012. So while I was still at Elm, they already had this vehicle at STC. But when Abdurrahman came back to
Mm.
Saudi, the discussion he had, was what about, how do we make this actually scale, and how do we make the assets actually adapt inside the STC to the needs of the digital economy? It had to be a different angle. So Abdurrahman told me about this, and we decided to join forces, and we presented an idea to the board of STC at the time of, let us be your hedge to all the bets that you're making. At the time, STC was building STC Pay, which is today STC Bank. They were having a lot of other initiatives, and they were making good progress there. But the angle that we came with is, we're digital natives. We understand digital. Let's build something that is totally independent from STC as a GPLP structured fund, and the STC would become a limited partner there. But also at the same time, do something similar that we did with Elm, which is allow us access to those assets. So whether those assets were data, the network, the customer base, in a very controlled manner, of course, but that would be a value add that we can provide to the local startups that we invest in, so that they can better compete with the global companies. And it took us a year and a half almost, but at the end, CC's board decided to invest with us. We launched in 2018 with $500 million. But the CC had one condition, which was, if we wanted access to those assets, then they had to be the sole LP, the sole investor, and the first fund.
Oh.
Otherwise, it would not be fair to them, because the fruits of that access to the assets would go to other players as well. So we agreed, and we launched the fund, and we got to invest in companies like Kareem, Uniphonic, Mersul, and Visita out of Egypt, and others. And it was, at the time, the biggest independent fund in the region. And there, I discovered that your fund size actually dictates your strategy. And my
Yep.
passion actually was with the earlier stage startups. That's where I thought, MENA, in terms of its maturity, was where, had the most potential. So I had a discussion with the team, and I decided to transition out of STV, because $500 million meant that they had to focus mostly on the growth stage companies. And I wanted to go much, much earlier to pre-seed specifically. And that's how we created the new fund for Sukna Ventures today, which is a $50 million fund. We already deployed half of it in less than 3 years, and we're focused mostly on pre-seed and seed opportunities.
Very interesting. So, I mean, that's a great segue to go into my next question, which is if you can tell me more about Sukna and what the thesis is. So, I mean, pre seed, as I understand, but what else?
I think Sukna exemplifies a story that's happening in Saudi at least, and maybe in other MENA ecosystems, with how
Hmm.
the asset class is evolving here. Initially, VC meant that you'd invest in all technology companies, whether they are what we call tech-enabled companies or tech-driven. And that
Yep.
made sense because early on, there were lots of low-hanging fruit, and for a tech-enabled business, it actually exhibited high margins and high growth, similar to what tech-driven companies. In case the listeners are not clear on what's the differentiation between the two, the differentiation ultimately comes back to what kind of profile of cash flow, free cash flow they can generate, and what kind of growth trajectory they can be on. So basically, with tech-driven companies, the main secret sauce is about the technology. You build a technology engine and you compete with that. It doesn't matter if your competitors have much more money than you do, or better distribution or better brand name. The rules of the game here are about competing on technology and product and how you can innovate around those. Whereas with tech-enabled businesses, distribution actually helps a lot. The margins are a bit lower, and the secret sauce is not necessarily just technology. In fact, technology might not be the number one ingredient there. It could be marketing, it could be branding, it could be distribution, and other things. That
Yep.
changed, I think, in by 2022. A lot of VCs realized, this separation between the two types of technology companies, and you saw some kind of specialization in terms of whether they want to invest in tech-enabled or tech driven. For us,
Mm.
those actually required different asset classes. So when we created the first VC fund,
Mm.
we wanted to be purely, tech driven focused, and we wanted to deploy much quicker, and we wanted still to be able to invest in other technology companies that are not necessarily venture scalable or venture backable, but through different asset classes, different strategies, whether it's private equity,
Mm.
whether on that side it's private credit, whether it's through secondaries. And that's why we applied for a license here from the Capital Market Authority in Saudi, and that was granted to us late last year, so that we can actually launch those different strategies with different investors, with different teams, all separate and all
Mm.
independent, but they share one fabric in terms of compliance, technology, shared services, and so on. So it becomes much easier for new teams to be set up and activated to cover that technology space. Maybe before it didn't make a lot of sense for where the market was, but today they are really healthy pipelines for all those types of strategies. And that's how we are evolving Sukna from just being a VC firm into a technology investor that can actually cover the
Hmm.
life cycle of the tech company with different types of financing. But I also want to stress that, yeah, I want to stress here that focus is very critical here. It's paramount, right? So the teams are separate. It's not one fund investing in all, and that requires you to size every strategy accurately, right? So we come with the belief that VC is
Yep.
probably one of the highest, rewarding asset classes, but also very risky, and also requires a long time horizon. A typical life cycle for a
Yep.
fund, VC fund, is 10 years. Whereas if you talk about private credit, it's a shorter time horizon. It's a very different risk profile, different kind of return profile as well. So you cannot mix and match those asset classes. They have to be some kind of independence, some kind of Chinese walls between them, and that's where the capital structure
Hmm.
comes in. And from what I'm seeing in the market, we're not alone. We're seeing other players pursuing a similar evolution path, and I think that's a healthy thing for the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's healthy and it's an indication of how the ecosystem is progressing, isn't it? I mean, at first the deal flow was quite limited, so you had to
Yep.
be a generalist because there weren't that many great options across in one specific vertical or something like that. Now there are, and there are in different stages, and it makes sense to leverage the platform that you built for Sukna across different asset classes with different teams working on them. But for you, the focus is on the early stage and the tech driven, right? For you personally.
Personally, yes. I'm still a geek at heart, and I get excited by disruption, a real disruption by technology
Mhm.
that actually redefines a category, that actually resets the rules of a competition in a given market. And you find that only at early stage, specifically the seed stage.
Yeah, it's more fun. Or at least for me as well. So, talking of disruptive and liking disruptive, you're probably one of the only or one of the rare regional VCs that's speaking about space tech. I saw you had a session in Leap just earlier this week about this. So, tell me more about that. What excites you there?
Actually, something really peculiar and interesting happened in space that made this a VC game. What happened with SpaceX and reusable rockets, the cost of launching things to space became orders of magnitude cheaper than before. Whereas it was in thousands of dollars per kilogram, now it's getting to a price point where it's probably around, it's going to be very soon 50 kilos per kilogram, which now means that anyone actually can go to space. And there's so much low hanging fruit there. It's just mind boggling what kind of new use cases can be done in space that were not viable before. And it required, only it required a lot of capital and around a lot of capabilities. So what's happening today is there's a segment in the space economy which is called new space, and new space is where startups can actually compete with different use cases that don't require a lot of capital initially, but they require real innovation around technology and real understanding of the use cases. And there's also lots of infrastructure to be built, whether it's, for example, software defined radios for gathering data from different
Mm.
satellite protocols, whether it's for IoT from space, or even saving or extending the lifetimes of older satellites that are gradually getting away from their orbits and extending their lifetime and extending the revenue that their owners get from them. So this is a very exciting space,
Mm.
and it's also a technological sovereignty issue. You can see already, so many nations
Mm.
now have landed rovers or have plans to land rovers on the moon. I was reading news the other day that the standards body for allocating radio spectrums, ITU, was actually gonna run out of spectrum soon on the moon because of all the requests they're getting. So I think this is a very important space that we also get into, and it doesn't require a lot of infrastructure to be built up here. So we can actually leapfrog other ecosystems. It's kind of a democratized space
Mm.
where a local VC like us does have a meaningful shot of finding a good company here.
Yeah, I mean, these are exciting times in space all over the world.
Yeah.
And I have to hand it to Elon Musk for kickstarting the whole thing, to be honest. Um, so, I mean, speaking of disruptive technologies in space and things that are far out, what other technology trends are you seeing that are very interesting these days?
I think the advent of AI, models like today, the transformer model, whether it's GPT, Cloud, or others, is a very interesting phenomena. It means basically that a lot of the things that were too hard actually to do before are much easier. And forget the enterprise space. There's lots of opportunities there. A lot of people are talking. We're looking into it as well. But if you go into the scientific areas, whether it's biotech, it's geological engineering, mining, for example, medicine. There's so many use cases that can be unlocked today through startups utilizing these new models and also new research that's happening. It doesn't have to be big data or large language models. We invested in a company, for example, called Protinia out of Cairo that now is a partner of Amgen in Boston, in the US. Amgen is one of the biggest pharmas and pharmaceutical companies in the world. And it came out of
Yeah,
Cairo, and they utilized a small data model for 14 language models that actually performed
exactly.
extremely well. And they actually were able to get even grants from Google. Google, as many of you already know, are actively working in this space through AlphaFold, their
Yep,
protein
AlphaFold.
model. And yet they actually gave grants in millions of dollars to Protinia. And this is a company coming out of the region as well. So AI, I think, unlocked a lot of these sectors that were really stagnant for a while. It made it easier to do things that were probably brute force or it required a lot of manual grunt work, a lot of capital. And now it can be done in a much cheaper and much more effective ways than before.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about biotech is that like you have the confluence of AI has become mature, and there's new research that's appearing that can
Exactly.
use this AI, and at the same time there's more and more data because people are there. There's Apple Watch, there's all the wearables that people are using and following up 24 hours all their vital signs and things. So there's several things happening that all feed into each other into a very uh, um, optimistic kind of picture.
Absolutely, and I'll add to it another thing, and this is something I noticed in the Egyptian ecosystem specifically, which was Egypt has a lot of talent,
Mhm.
and for a long time, many companies around the world benefited from that talent through outsourcing to different engineering centers in Egypt. Now, with time, many of those engineers decided, you know what, this is something we can do ourselves. Why are we doing work for others? We want to build our own products, and we can compete on those. We know how to compete on those. So Protein is one example, but in the semiconductor space, we were also lucky to invest with a strong team at Infinilink, which is working on solving the energy problem in data centers because now it's with AI, data centers are very hungry for energy, and
Mm.
anything that would save that energy becomes hugely valuable. So they are replacing the electrical network switches with optical based, photonic based switches. And they have clients from the biggest
Wow.
semiconductor companies that they were doing services for. And now they want to enter the product space. And some of those clients are actually coming on board thinking that this is the team that they want to bet on. So that's a very interesting phenomena in the region that I think we'll see in other places as well as we break
Yep.
that psychological barrier and we see those experiences accumulating. Also, you mentioned before the podcast the diaspora of Arabs around the world who are working on very advanced technologies in various establishments, and many of those now want to come back to their homelands and contribute. And the changes that are happening in regulation, the opening up of the market, the presence of financing is also allowing a lot of that talent to come back. And sometimes it's not even MENA talent; it's talent from everywhere that wants to build
Yep.
in MENA. They're seeing the dynamism, they're seeing the speed that is happening here, and they decided that you know what, we want to come here and build. And that's something that we're seeing in our deal flow. A lot of them are actually not even from the region, but they want to make the region their first market.
Yeah, I mean, these are exciting times. I mean, I don't think 5 years ago one would have foreseen that we'd have like not only people from the diaspora coming home, but actual totally foreigners who don't live here coming here to build things because this is a better place to build. It's really exciting.
Yep.
So, speaking of exciting, you were recently another panel you had at the Leap conference was titled "What's Next for the Saudi Ecosystem." So,
I'm asking you, what's next for the Saudi ecosystem?
Well, Saudi in 23, it peaked at 1.3, $1.4 billion in VC investment. But I think looking at the amount of money being put into the market is like looking at the rear view mirror instead of looking straight ahead. If you look at straight ahead, what we really
Hmm.
are seeing is that makes us very excited. And I can see in Saudi market at least getting to $10 billion in the next few years if this actually pans out. Is the continuation of deregulation. Today, the policymakers see startups not as a CSR kind of feel good initiative, but actually an integral part of the economy. And that is making it much easier for the ecosystem to actually influence the decision making and the policies and the kind of regulation that is coming out today. And that's huge. Taxation is also a story, a 2025 story that will from our discussions with the policymakers, that will also dramatically see an improvement that will make Saudi compete on a global level as well. And then you have the deep tech side. So in the last year or 2 years, I would say there's been a lot of reforms around IP commercialization, research-based startups that are being launched. We started talking about the a lot of the talent going to ecosystems like the US and others, studying at the best universities around the world. But when they would come back, a few years back, there wasn't really an opportunity for them to do much with that knowledge. Now that's changing. It's becoming much, much more easier for them to actually take those research based IP and take it to the market. The universities are changing their systems around IP ownership. Government procurement is also changing. Now, this is, we talked about SpaceX. SpaceX owns a lot of success to the involvement of NASA and the US government, although SpaceX had to take them to court to change the procurement laws so that they can have a fair shot at competing. But now, NASA is probably, glad that SpaceX is involved, and they're seeing the results of what a startup can contribute. And that learning is happening here as well. So that's also very interesting to see a lot of the sectors that were kind of hard to access for startups opening up, whether it's energy, health, defense, and others, which means a much, much bigger market. Also, we talked about the talent story. It's become very easy for talent all over the world to come into Saudi and build here. There's the entrepreneurial license that the Ministry of Investment introduced, and now we're seeing the results in our deal flow. And another point that is also exciting, talking about overcoming psychological barriers, is local companies going global. So the TAM now is much, much bigger than before. If you're in the US, you're lucky because it's a huge TAM. It's a unified market, and there's no other market like it. But the second best thing is if you can actually go global. So in all our investments we've made so far, we always have a conversation with the founders. Do you really intend to go global? Is this something that you want? Is this a playbook that can actually support this? And if the answer is yes, we would typically invest. If it's no, then it's not for us. And now we're seeing the success stories happen. One of our portfolio companies, Classera, in the edtech space, actually today operates across 40 countries around the world, 40. So we think that is a data point that will open, that we'll see more of
Yeah.
going forward. And a lot of our companies are now expanding into other, other markets, whether regional or global. Initially, the traditional thinking was you had to expand regionally before you go global. But now we're seeing examples of companies
Hmm.
actually skipping the region, going global directly. Not because the region global is better than regional or vice versa. It's just that for the type of product that they are doing, in many cases, it's better for them to go global. Whereas for others, it's better to go regional. But at least that barrier is also broken.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if we double click on Classera, what from what you've seen, for example, did they start with the global? Was their product global capable from day one or not? And what do you think in general is the what are the criteria for companies that can actually make that move? What do they look like when you assess them, other than having the internal ambition? What do they structurally look like?
Yeah, so Classera, started out in the U.S. actually. The co-founder CEO Mohammed Madani was studying there in the U.S., but his co-founder was here in Saudi, so in
Mm,
Jeddah. So they had presence in both markets, but soon afterwards they decided to focus on Saudi first, because at the time it was a better incubator for a company like theirs. Demographics,
mhm,
spending on schools, the need was much higher. But being in the US also helped them understand what kind of product decisions they needed to make, so that it doesn't become a
mm.
ultra local, hyper local product, but actually a product that can go global. And that's actually the second criteria for success, is having a strong product mentality, understanding how to build
Mm.
something for the local market, but at the same time it can actually be expanded into a global consumer or global customer base as well.
Yeah, so they're kind of it's building with a global mindset, so to speak. So you're keeping degrees of freedom in your design so that you know that you'll be able to expand easily in the future, or you're aware of what's happening in other markets, etc. as you build.
Very true. Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, you and I, we had a very brief exchange today on Twitter. You were talking about how in the world of AI, companies are reaching tens of millions of ARR in months or 2 years maximum. Like Cursor reached 100 million in 2 years. That's amazing. And Bolt also, and Midjourney. We spoke about a lot of these. So, I mean, that kind of entails the things are changing in the software market. I mean, how do you see software and software investments these days, and also how do you see the changes in for the venture capital industry because of what's happening?
That's a great question. So, think about technology. It gets obsolete very quickly, and consistently you see new waves and new generations of tech companies making the previous generation obsolete. Microsoft CEO made a lot of noise a few weeks back when he declared that SaaS was dead. And I think it's a very nuanced view. It's not necessarily dead, but it basically means that there's a new paradigm, and that paradigm actually has higher efficiency, and SaaS can adopt some of those to compete. But the best advice I would give to founders: don't get stuck on labels, don't get stuck on an operating model or a certain technology. As a founder, what you really focused on is the need of the customer. If you understand the need of the customer, then you can always adopt new technologies as they come and stay relevant. Apple and Microsoft are both companies that were founded in the 70s, and they're still big players today. It's because that understanding of the customer need and having the ability and agility to actually keep up with the technological advancements. But for us VCs, that's really critical, right? Because having free cash flow at the end of the day is what we're investing in. We're investing in an engine that produces profitability, and high profitability that actually offsets the risk that is involved in investing in them. So technology is always improving that productivity, is always pushing the envelope for higher productivity. And with generative AI, that's a very interesting phenomena that is happening. There's still some costs involved. For example, compute is still expensive. Utilizing the foundation models, or if you're running your own models, still very expensive to get the GPUs from NVIDIA and so on. But the thing about technology, those costs will go down as the technology mature. So now becomes, how do I build the right product? And many of these companies are facing an issue today, which is fine for this stage, which is, what's the defensibility of the business that they're building? What kind of moats can they build around it? It's not clear yet, but investors are willing to bet on the teams that they can actually grow into a place where they have the luxury and understanding of the market to build those moats, because no one today knows where those moats are going to come from. Is the value going to be captured by the LLM providers? Is it going to be captured by the application side? Is it by the tooling companies? It's a new race, and you have to think about how this value chain is going to look like, and the distribution of profits between them 5 years, 7 years from now is going to look like. And this is assuming that nothing changes in terms of the tech or paradigms that we're seeing today. But in fact, as DeepSeek showed, this can come any day. And if you look at research papers, there's lots of new candidates that could replace the transformer model on the LLM side. Or, there's lots of work happening on the computing architecture side, not just, with GPUs, but maybe even quantum computing, or probabilistic computing, or neuromorphic computing, radically different architectures that could actually make everything that we're seeing today and excited today about also obsolete. So it's a very interesting game. It's very high risk, but this is what I think VC is about: is making those bets early on when others are not as willing to do so. If it's clear, if what in VC lingo, if it's legible, then it's probably not VC. If it's legible and everyone can see it, it's probably something more for
Exactly.
private equity, family offices,
If it's
stock market.
consensus.
Exactly.
Yep.
If it's non-consensus, it's not legible. This is where you really need to understand the market. You really need to know who are the founders, what kind of agility they can exhibit, what kind of thinking and decision making they can build over time. That's where I think VC becomes much more viable than the other assets.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, VC, even though technology is creating so much value so quickly, VC is becoming harder in the sense that it's more difficult to see into the future because so many things might change, as you are mentioning. I mean, the basic computing architecture might change. The foundational models might be totally disrupted themselves after spending billions of dollars. The applications might be disrupted by the foundational models. So making that bet is harder and harder these days.
Yep, and that's what Jeff Bezos said when he was asked about how the future looks like. He said, "No one asked me what's not going to change in the future. Everyone's asking what's going to change in the future, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
what the customer wants is not going to change, and you need to focus on that." But even for VCs,
exactly.
one of the things that I learned is your job as a VC is not to think about the future. I think your job is to understand the market as it is today and find those sprouts of new tech, new paradigms taking root in the market, and see them before anyone else sees them, right? And I think one of the benchmark partners put this eloquently. He said, "It's not my job to think about the future. My job is to see the present very clearly." And if you can do that, then
Mm,
that's where you can make bets. Because thinking about the future, that's I think a big waste of time.
impossible.
It's not for
Yeah.
investment, because you know what's going to happen in the future, so you're just guessing. But when you're looking into what are the communities are thinking today, I spend about a third of my time, or even more, just talking with people, going to labs, uh, talking with strong founders, seeing what's happening in the market, reading a lot, even trying sometimes to go back into programming or reading, about the latest research papers,
Mm.
just to find those early seeds and the sprouts that are present today that I would be
Yeah.
willing to bet on. That I think is much more reasonable, even though VC is still speculation, but at least speculation based on something that is already present in the market, and you're seeing initial kind of signs that there's something promising there.
Yeah, it's and you know what they say about, the future is already here, but it's just not evenly distributed. So
Exactly.
uh, it's you find it. Some people are living in the future already somewhere in some pocket of the internet,
Yes,
or some research center or something like that, and so you meet these people, and then you decide, you're going to join them for the ride to reach the future before anyone else.
100%.
Yeah.
And usually people call us others who live in the future, they call them crazy. Right? So,
Yeah,
example with
yeah.
Elm, when they were building e-government, everyone thought they were crazy. Everyone thought I made the wrong decision joining this team. Why would you come back from Microsoft and work for a startup that's wasting their time in the wrong market, the wrong time? And now it's very clear. It's common sense. Yeah, e-government. That's very intuitive. Everyone is building e-government today.
It's always like that looking backwards, right? It's intuitive.
Yep,
It was obvious.
exactly.
Hey, what did Gandhi say? First they laugh at you, and then they fight you, then you win.
That's it. Yeah.
Something like that, anyway. Yeah. So, you guys at Sukna Ventures, you have investments all over the world. So, I mean, Japan, Ukraine, US, of course, Saudi, UAE, everywhere. So, I mean, how do you handle deal flow? I mean, what's your approach to getting deal flow and going through it?
Right. So today we actually have two different investment vehicles. There's a legacy investment vehicle that was more
Hmm.
opportunistic, and that's where you see some companies that are not within our current focus and the VC fund,
Ah,
and also you see fund investments from it as well, not just startups.
yes.
But then there's the $50 million VC fund, and this is a clear mandate on early stage startups that are focusing on the MENA market. So it doesn't necessarily mean a MENA founder or
Ah,
MENA
okay.
startup, as long as they have a path to the MENA market and they can meaningfully grow through getting access to the MENA market. And this is how we can actually
Hmm.
add value. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for us to invest in a company that we can't help or can't assist. Actually, it makes it more risky for us to be investing in a company that we don't uh, become a value add to them. We don't have a
Mm.
relationship. The founder doesn't see us as adding much to their growth. So the value add component here is very important filter for us, whether we invest in a company or not. So when they want to access MENA market, especially the GCC, this is where we think we can add the value, and it's one of the filters for the companies we invest in as well.
Hmm. Okay, so I was a bit misled by the website because it doesn't separate between the different investment vehicles.
Yeah,
Um,
there's actually a filter there. If anyone goes there, there's actually a filter,
ah,
but we need to
yeah,
redesign. We need to redesign the page because it's tricking a lot of people. Definitely.
yeah. Yeah, tricked me. So, can you tell me about one of your recent investments and why you made it?
Sure. We recently invested in a Riyadh-based company called Athir, and this is, I think, a contrarian bet that we're making because it's a hardware company, and a lot of VCs don't like hardware. They say hardware is hard, especially when you're thinking about competition from the Chinese. Athir was co-founded by Abdurrahman Abdurrahman. The first Abdurrahman Al-Hamid, he's a PhD in RF engineering, which is wireless technologies. And he just came back recently from the US. He was working in the silicon team for Apple in Cupertino,
Hmm.
and decided he wanted to come back home and saw an opportunity with his co-founder in building a very fast, high bandwidth, low error wireless network that solves a lot of the
Mm,
problems that are exhibited by either fiber or 5G. Fiber is fast, high bandwidth, but it requires a lot of infrastructure work. You're digging in the ground, there's a lot of maintenance, and then there's some issues with it. 5G latency, if you ask gamers, they'll tell you latency is an issue, bandwidth is an issue.
mm,
So 60 gigahertz is a band in the spectrum that actually gives you high performance in a wireless signal,
mm,
but it's also very sensitive to dust, even to light, and the way the terrain is made up. If a new building is built, then the network can get messed up. So this actually requires the solution to be very dynamic and utilizes AI. So in their solution, they have a neural network processing unit, an NPU, to actually be able to modulate the signal dynamically and ensure that the reliability of the network stays on. And they also have a mesh-based topology if needed, so that private networks can be built.
mm,
And they were actually they able to convince big customers here in Saudi to replace some of their equipment that they got from big names from different markets with their own solution. It was because it's a very radically
wow.
different design. It was one third the cost of the bigger players, even though they don't have the advantage of economies of scale, and even more reliable than theirs. And so we decided to invest in the company. We were lucky that they allowed us in, and we're very excited about what they're building as well.
That sounds like an incredible bet. I hope it works out much better even than you imagined.
I hope so.
It's great to see these types of companies built in the region.
Yeah, and Ali, maybe if I can take this into a different angle, one thing that is allowing us to do these big bets, these really risky, weird kind of areas and categories, is the type of LP base that we have. And I can tell you from being in this space for a long time now that there's also an evolution that's happening on the investor side, the people who invest or institutions that invest in VC funds. Initially, you know, those LPs did not, they like technology, but they didn't like high risk stuff. And the ecosystem
Yep.
was still new, still, you could do what they call geographic arbitration. You copycat stuff, from other parts of the world, and there's a successful e-commerce site or a successful marketplace. You build one like it here. You add the logistics, the payment, and everything else, and that's a very profitable investment for you. Those the days of building copycats like that easily are long gone, and everyone, it's become much easier. The barrier to build these things is very low. Low hanging fruit is gone. Now you really have
Hmm.
to build stuff that is very hard. uh, so the LPs evolved over time, and many of them, they invest directly in the uh, typical traditional SaaS marketplaces and everything else. So they don't need a VC firm like us to do those investments on their behalf. They can do it directly, and that's what's happening for all of our LPs. They're sophisticated investors that have direct deal flow and have teams specializing in investing in those tech-enabled businesses. But because they're sophisticated investors, because of the experience that they had over the years, whether investing in the region or outside, many of them are investing in VCs in the US and other places. They developed more sophistication in terms of how they want their portfolio to look like, and they saw a gap in their local high return, high risk kind of investment, and that's what they wanted from us. They didn't want us to invest in the low hanging fruit. They want us to go into those weird areas, the non-contrarian bets, and make it
That's great.
for them. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for them to pay us the fees that they are paying us, or to share the returns with us after the fund is done, assuming we do have those returns in the next few years.
That's great. So, I mean, are these LPs? It's really good that they're sophisticated like this and they have these experiences. Are they more? Are these family offices or institutional LPs that have this level of have reached this level of sophistication?
The whole spectrum. So some of them are family offices, some
Nice.
of them are institutional investors. We've also seen banks coming in, Sharia compliant banks. And this is another story that I
Hmm.
think we'll see developing over the next 2 years, which is what's the role of endowment? So all the institutional investors, the family
Mm.
offices, they are long terms, but I wouldn't label them as patient capital. Patient capital, especially when you're investing
Mm.
in deep tech, requires a much longer time horizon, like 15 years, 20 years. You have a lot of those in the US, right? University endowments and
Yes.
others, foundations, for example. We don't have many of them here that are involved in the VC. There's still this separation between the endowments and foundations and the VC world. Although, if you think about it, VC, as in its very core, or startups and innovation, is should be part of the endowment's mandate,
Yeah, it's very
because you
aligned.
yes, it's very on. You're creating jobs, you're helping the economy, you're improving the independence of the populace. But for some reason or another,
Yep.
that didn't happen a lot. So one of the things that we're working with other VCs, with the local Saudi VC Association, and even the LP base here,
Hmm.
is how do we actually involve those new types of LPs, because they are really important, critical. If we wanted to get that to 10 billion
Yep.
ceiling I told you about, I think it's very critical that we convince them to participate in what's happening
Yes.
here. Luckily for us, and I should give credit to my partner here, Faris, who's a financial guru. We were able to convince at least two banks with the Sharia compliant committees that what we were doing actually aligned with the Sharia requirements. Now, the next stage for us and all the other VCs is get those endowments and foundations to see that it's also very important for them to be part of the innovation ecosystem to give that huge unlock. So, as we talk about the evolution of founders, the evolution of VCs, we also should also put the spotlight on the evolution of the LP base and what kind of new players that we need to come in and support what's happening.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, we need to unlock all the keys, not just the founders and VCs. And capital
100%.
is the core thing for us at the end of the day. And are you seeing like regulatory roadblocks to that? I would imagine that getting endowments, because I believe it or not, in the UK, for example, pension funds cannot, unlike the US, they cannot invest in VC. So, I mean, there is regulation that needs to be reformed even in countries in Europe. So, is that what you're seeing in the region as well?
I can talk about Saudi specifically, and I can tell you uh, the regulation is very forward thinking here. And in fact, increasing the role of nonprofits and foundations is part of Vision 2030. And there's been a lot of work done to do that. There are even accelerators done, for example, by MISC for foundations, endowments, and nonprofits to
Mm,
develop their capabilities in the future. So the Vision 2030 KPIs actually want to see a bigger role for the nonprofit sector in the economy. And in fact, you probably saw in the news lately when Tabi closed their $160 million round, one
hmm.
of the investors that actually um, uh, invested in this round, invested in the round before it, is Hasana, which is the investment arm for the pension entity here in Saudi. So they are able to do that for pension, and the regulation is not a big hurdle. I think the biggest hurdle is not with them; it's really with the mindset. Is is the role of foundations and endowments to support the creation of new jobs and improve the economy or not? Are they going to be limited just to religious kind of activities like building a new mosque, or actually building the economy is something that they need to come and get into? I think the first barrier was whether this is Sharia compliant or not. I think that is now, being answered by clearly saying yes. Now the other question is this the mandate of an endowment or foundation? Is it part of their, roles? I think that is the thing that we need to work together as a ecosystem on answering in a way that allows those endowments and foundations to become an active participant. And a very important, if you look at the US ecosystem compared to Europe, one glaring difference between them is the role of endowments and foundations. It's practically absent in Europe, but they are one of the biggest LPs in the US. And
Exactly.
I hope we figure this out before the other ecosystems,
The
because
Europeans.
I wish them luck, but I also want to see this happen very quickly, because it's a push that we need, especially since we're now getting into the harder stuff, the deep tech stuff, where we need that patience, we need that
Yep.
generational view of
Mhm.
capital and its relationship to the economy.
Yeah. Very cool. Going from the big picture of the overall ecosystem and kind of going to the board level. You serve on the boards of several companies. What do you think makes a board a good board or an effective board?
I think the criteria changes as the company evolves. So a company
Hmm.
that is still in building mode would require a different kind of contribution from the board than a company that is already stable. That is also very different from a company that is in a stage where they need to exit, be acquired, or do an
Mm.
IPO. So it depends, and that's why boards are not permanent. They change every few years, because
Hmm.
the company also that they are governing also changes, and its needs also change. But for you know growth stage companies, I think the board has a big role in becoming a partner for the executive team, making sure that the decision making engine that they're building actually can survive this rapid growth, this scaling, because in many cases, the first victim for scaling a company is the corporate culture, is the type of decision making that happens, and that could kill a company. It almost did that with Uber, and we all remember the fight that happened with their investor Benchmark at the time. It was over that governance and making sure that decision making actually scales as the company grows, and also making sure that the company can actually find future investors and make sure that the financial or the capital structure of the company also survives. The executive team is busy building the company, the team, the product, but also you need to build things like the financial structure of the company, the capital structure there, making sure that the compliance also doesn't become a big issue that could actually damage the company going forward. So the longer term stuff as well. But it's typically at this stage, it's a very collaborative relationship. And in many cases, also, the board members have to be ready to make the tough decision on behalf of the shareholders if, for whatever reason, the company, the executive team reaches a stage where they're deemed not to be the right drivers of that growth, and different driver needs to come in. That's also the responsibility of the
Hmm.
board to make sure that they monitor this. They try to not reach that stage as much as possible by helping the team,
Yep.
and getting them the type of senior executives to help them. But sometimes it happens, and that's a tough discussion, but it needs to happen, because at the end of the
Hmm.
day, it's all about the interests of the company and the shareholders. And that's something that we talk with our founders with. Being an early stage investor, we try to prepare them. We're not really your friends per se. There's a
Yeah.
inherent conflict of interest between us and you, but let's make this very clear from day one. Let's make it very transparent. And we love you at a personal level. We'll always be your friends. But know that if a hard decision comes, then and we have to pull the trigger, then we will do that. And sometimes we also, because you know the risk profiles are different between us and the founder. The founder puts all the eggs in one basket, their company,
Yep.
whereas we have a portfolio of tens of companies. We can sometimes be tempted into pushing the company into more risk than it could
Hmm.
absorb, because we're making other bets as well. So if one fails, then at least the other bets have a surviving possibility. Whereas with the founder,
Yeah.
if it fails, then that's the end of the game. So those dynamics are things that we try to work with our founders, explain it to them, and make them prepared, because the next wave of investors that will come after us, and the next wave of investors after them, will be expecting more maturity from them, and will be expecting more structured kind of relationship with them. And even if you have smooth
Exactly.
sailing until an IPO, after the IPO, also, now you're a company under the view of everyone in the market. Compliance is
Hmm.
paramount. It's something that could be essential for the company. So this is the kind of discussions the board need to have with the founders or the executive team very early on.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, and when you think about board directors, the best board directors, are they better listeners or are they better participators in the discussion or talkers, so to speak?
I like to see diversity in the board in terms of capabilities and what spikes each board member brings in. Some of them are probably stronger on the business development side and strategy. They have a good networking capabilities that help the company with their growth. Some of them are much stronger in terms of governance capabilities, and focus more on that. And others have other skills that could also be beneficial. So it's almost like building a sports team. You have to have those different capabilities
Mm.
brought in by different board members, and have also a chairman or chairperson that can manage that team and make sure that everyone gives the best that they have.
Cool. So, Waleed, everybody has like an anti-portfolio, the companies that
Oh
they
man.
passed on, but maybe, they wish they hadn't passed on. Uh,
Yes.
or maybe they're so happy that they passed on, even though because it turned out bad in the end. Just there, everybody has these. Can you recall like one that really stands out that you and what you learned from it?
Sure. So, what's worse than a bad investment that fails? A really great investment that you pass on.
Oh,
So
yeah,
this is
it really
the
hurts. The painful one.
this is yes, this is the biggest concern for me, is if I pass on a startup that actually could have returned the fund for me, or double the size of the fund, or triple the size, or even more.
Yep.
That is the biggest sin a VC can make, and it's always worrying. And for us, we do track the companies we pass on. We
Hmm.
track them on our Slack. We have a label, anti portfolio, and we try to manage the
Hmm.
uh, uh, tracking their life cycle. What's happening there? If we pass on a deal that actually improved and turned out to be a great deal, then why did we pass on them? What kind of criteria changes that we need to make to ensure that we don't miss the next time, and learn from those lessons, right? But it's a very hard psychologically to happen. And I happen to personally pass on a few. I'll mention a name if that's okay. But there's a company called Nearpay. Great founders. I've known one of the founders here in Saudi. I've known Hamza, one of the co-founders, for a long time. But I really thought, because,
Hmm.
and this is the bias that technology knowledge brings, the curse of knowledge sometimes. Being a
Hmm. Hmm.
technologist, I thought what they were building, which is a soft point of sale, soft POS, what they call. So you can, instead of using a special card reader, you can use any device, even your phone, to read a card and make the transaction.
Mm,
I thought that would not be too hard for the established players to build themselves, and turned out it wasn't that easy. It was actually hard, and the company managed,
mm,
luckily, to grow beyond what I
mhm.
expected. And it's a lesson that I learned from. I wish the team all the best. And it's something that, reminds me every day that my job as a VC is to actually make sure that I try to neutralize the biases I have as much as possible. Sometimes that works for me, sometimes it doesn't. And that's why I'm also a big believer in VCs having multiple partners, multiple decision makers, so that if one has certain biases, maybe the other doesn't. With different backgrounds, right? So we see different angles, we have different points of views, and sometimes we have to, it slows us down sometimes because we have those different points of views, but it's also very healthy, and it makes you
Absolutely.
really think at a very clear and deep level why you're making a decision, whether it's a yes or a no.
Yeah, but in this specific example, I was thinking as you were talking, what could you have done at that time to disprove your idea? And I think it was a reasonable reason to pass. To be honest, even now when I'm listening to you, that it could have been that done by the competitors. So it
Yeah,
would have been
yeah,
difficult for you to not, yeah, or maybe the only thing maybe that comes to mind is the idea that maybe, yeah, everything can be done by Google or Uber or something like that, but that's not a reason to pass in the as a, just as a matter of principle. But that's also hard because sometimes it's not true. So it's difficult to learn from this example for me at least.
well, for me, there were a few lessons, right? First of all, I mentioned that I knew one of the co-founders
Mm,
before, a serial entrepreneur, right? So I should have asked myself,
right.
when a serial entrepreneur who has experience, who's a veteran of the space, decides they want to spend the next two or
Mm,
3 years at least of their life on the career on something like this, that clearly for me, it was easy. At least that's what I thought.
mm,
I should have actually talked more with them
yeah.
and understand their point of view. Maybe also I should have,
Yeah. Great.
asked more about it, and from market participants, what kind of frustrations they had. And also for pre-seed, I think this helped me, not just this, but other incidents as well, helped me
Hmm.
distribute the weights of my valuation of a startup in pre-seed. So you have three different things that you look at any opportunity, right? Just to oversimplify it: the market that decides
Yep.
how big the TAM, the value pool is; then the team, what they're going to do about it, and how much market share they can get; and then the product that they're building and what pricing points it brings for them. In pre-seed,
Hmm.
product should not receive as much weight as market and team. And I think with Nearpay, I put too much emphasis on the product, more than I should have, done, and I should have, you know, gone with the founder and the market because, like you said, it's a big market, and these are experienced founders. So maybe I should have added more weight there, and that's what I do today with pre-seed. I focus and emphasize more the market, the timing, and the team than product, because the product, first of all, it's very hard to assess it. It's still being built, but also it's
Hmm.
going to evolve. And they may pivot. They might find other different,
Yep. Yep.
value propositions for it. So it's going to change, but the team is not going to change, and the market is might
Yep.
change, but it's much slower than the velocity of the product itself. So that's another lesson that, for me, at least,
Yeah, that's an excellent one.
I'm applying today.
And if you were going to choose between market and team, which would you think is more important in pre-seed, of course?
Market. if you look at the history
Okay.
and this is a discussion sometimes I have with the founders, right? But if you look at the history of
Yep.
technology space from the early days, right? Whether from the days of Oracle and Microsoft to OpenAI today, uh, successful startups ride a wave. There's lots of
Hmm.
externalities, and you can go back into the history of technology and see lots of the ideas that we think are new today, they have actually been tried before,
Yep.
but the success factors for them were not there. Whether it's the watch TV that Casio did or Seiko did back in the 80s, and now
Hmm.
everyone has TV on their mobile phones, but it's not TV, it's streaming. It's a very different paradigm. But for them at the time, it wasn't clear. So and Google, came at a time where there were already more than 20 search engines, but they rode the wave of what was happening and what kind of things were improving. If it wasn't for the tech bubble, for example, and the internet bubble, then we would
Yep.
not have a lot of fiber investments, the dark fiber they called it at the time, that made broadband
Yep.
very cheap, so that a company like YouTube
Exactly.
now became viable, right? If it wasn't for the smartphone revolution, Uber would not have been viable. There were players before Uber and left. So I think the market and the externalities in that market actually are very important for the success of the team. And Mark Andreessen said it. A a good team and a bad market always wins. But that doesn't say
Market
you
wins.
can't, yeah, you can't have a discussion with the founders and try to understand. Maybe you're talking about a different market than they have in mind, right? Maybe they're saying something that you're not
Yeah.
saying, and get
Exactly.
educated. Be humble enough to be educated by the founders, and that's another reason for me to establish a relationship very early on before even they want to raise. Ideally, I want to know the founder
Yes.
at least a few months before they raise. That way, I can have enough time to learn
Hmm.
from them, understand how they think, how they behave, and then when investment times comes, at least they're not an unknown entity for me. The risk is much lower with them, at
Mm.
least, and maybe they benefited my understanding of the market as well. Whereas if it's just
Yep.
purely transactional, they come to me and I have to close the deal in a
Exactly.
few weeks. It's very hard for me to get educated in the market and change maybe some of the misconceptions I have around it.
Yeah, that's so true. Even though, of course, I mean, market is so tough to size because, I mean, for example, building on the Uber example you gave, when they went to most investors, even they were saying the market was the total taxi, market. They didn't imagine that the market would expand so much and be so much bigger even than taxis ever were. So it's just tough to market is really tough to size in the beginning, especially
Very
for, of
true.
course, the very disruptive startups.
Very
Yeah,
true. And like you said before, sometimes it's only clear when you look backwards, right? When you look in the rear view mirror.
exactly.
And that's why VC is not really about, so it's not really about just picking the right company, because that's more art than
Mhm.
science. The science part is really about building the portfolio at the higher level. So
Yes, yes.
you know for a fact that you're going to make a lot of mistakes as an investor. There's so many unknowns, but
Yep.
you could be excused for making a couple of investments that don't pan out, or a few more even, but you're not really excused
Mm.
for making a bad strategy at the portfolio level. If all your investments are correlated, for example, or
Yep.
you're not distributed well within the value chain of the investments that you make. So I think of this as two kind of levels of investment. You decide on the portfolio strategy. This is more scientific. You know what the exit rate is, what the survival rate is, the valuations, how they look like across different stages. So those are relatively stable, and here you have to put a lot of thinking behind it. Whereas with the startups themselves, in many cases, you know for a fact that you don't have all the information needed to decide the success or not. So there is some speculation behind it. It is speculative in nature. You have to face that fact. You have to live in
Hmm.
peace with it. You do your best, but still, at the end of the day, you know that there are things that you don't control. But what you really control, have much more control on, is the portfolio. So it's not an excuse for you to say, well, an unknown, I'm done. If you didn't do a good job at the portfolio level. And that's why it's very important for you to always be in the market and get those signals and refine and change and adapt in your portfolio strategies, and decide what is the size of this, the portfolio, how much ownership I want, when do I exit. All these questions should be solved one way or another at the portfolio level, instead of just making investments and whatever happens. That doesn't end well typically.
Yeah, I mean that's great wisdom. Absolutely. It's very interesting how you talk about like the portfolio and managing that, managing how to exit and things like that. Of course, globally as well as regionally, there's been a bit of a slowdown in the last couple of years in exits and IPOs, and hence also in LP activity, etc. That's the global view. Is it also the same for KSA, or is it not the same case in terms of LP activity?
In some ways, it's even a bit tougher. At least that was the case
Mm.
for the last few years. And it's a question that is always on the minds of LPs that we meet with. I think this is going to improve a lot for two things. First of all, we have now a lot of companies that reached the IPO stage, whether they're locally native, companies, or companies that relocated to Saudi, like Tabi, for example, that we mentioned before, and now are planning their IPO. The second part is on the regulatory and taxation fronts. The regulation for IPOs have been simplified a lot. The process now is much more streamlined. And then there's the taxation part. There
Hmm.
was an issue with the capital gain tax for many of these companies that are actually pretty ready to do an IPO, but this was an issue for them, and
Mm.
for some of them, because we already saw some successful IPOs like Rasan recently, and
Yep.
uh, nice one as well. But for those that are in, for example, an English common law jurisdiction, then it can be an issue, and that from what we're hearing from through the association, this is something that is already solved. I already met last week with Leap, a big event for tech here, and I was talking with some of those cross stage companies, and they were
Hmm.
telling us that they're actually resuming their work on IPO. So we should hear good news on the exits front very soon. The other part was the mentality, and when we talked about boards just a moment ago, mentality of the big players in terms of how they think about the strategy for growth of their bigger companies. And if you look at an ecosystem like the US, actually most exits are through mergers and acquisitions, right? M&A. That's how most
Yep.
of startups actually exit, and that's how you generate liquidity as an investor. In Saudi, and I think a lot of the other countries in MENA, we haven't seen that M&A pick up very quickly. And when you talk with the big corporates, they say, we want it, and it's just that we're not finding the right type of companies that we think that will help our growth strategy. And if you talk with startups or board members, even, you see a different story, which is a lot of these corporates, they think that they can do it themselves, and that they are willing to
Mm.
spend more time and money to build it internally rather than acquire a company. And I blame the boards for that, because the boards are not incentivized enough, in my view, to actually be more aggressive on growth. If you're really aggressive on growth, you'd actually go with M&A. And to prove that
Mm.
point, look at VC-backed companies. Foodex, for example, last week announced a lot of, at least a couple of
Yep.
acquisitions. Clasera made acquisitions. Uniphonic and others are either making acquisitions or investing in
Yeah.
smaller startups, because growth for them is a high priority. They have to grow. There's no other option. And the board consists of investors who want them to grow as well. I think this is changing now with the bigger companies. I'm lucky to be
Hmm.
in a couple of those companies that are thinking about inorganic growth. and they wanted someone with an investment background to help them think about the space and find those companies for them, and help with think about how they can integrate them into their operations. So I think this is also a story that is uh, changing to the better this year and next year. And besides IPOs, I also expect to see a much bigger or much more active M&A transactions happening in the next 18 months.
That's great to hear, and it is one of the most effective ways to grow, indeed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going back to the tactical aspect of investing, what's your go-to question that you like to ask founders?
Well, you talked about anti-portfolio. So one of my favorite go-to question is, and this actually is something that founders also like to hear. What is the thing that
Hmm.
other investors don't get about you, right? What do people miss about the
Mm.
company and work that you're doing? And
Yeah, yeah,
this is an open-ended question that allows the founder to actually address directly and explicitly the biases that investors have, where they are wrong in their view, and also it opens up in many cases it opens them up emotionally. You get to see the frustrations, how they deal with it, how they're
yeah.
thinking about it, and allows for more
Mm.
in-depth back and forth questions with them as well. But it sets the tone where, listen, I'm not here to teach you as an investor what you want to do. I actually want to learn from you.
Yep.
Can you actually teach me? Can you actually help show me where
Mm.
you have that secret insight that no one else has? Otherwise, if that insight is common and everyone knows it, then this is probably not the right investment for us as a VC. We assume there's a secret that you only know about, and that's what I want to know.
Yep. That's a great question. I have to remember to ask it sometime. So you see a lot of regional deal flow, of course. What do you see as the kind of up and coming trends? What are the verticals that are going to have strong startups in the coming few years?
So, besides the AI stuff, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is just theatric AI for the
Hmm.
sake of AI.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
we don't make that. It doesn't mean that we don't look at it. We know that there is real work and real value being added by some of those companies. We just need to see through the noise. But in terms of verticals, I'd imagine prop tech is picking up recently. Insurance, healthcare, those are also very interesting. Now with the rise of technological sovereignty, deep tech, data centers, cybersecurity, they're also seeing more demand from the market to local players. Biotech also naturally is seeing a lot of love. Here in Saudi, in Riyadh, the Royal Commission for Riyadh is doing a lot of good work there, and they want to make sure that Riyadh becomes a competitive hub for this. And
Interesting.
even in semiconductor design, if you look at Saudi, there's this dual strategy that is being run by the government and PIF. So PIF created a company called Alat,
Mm.
which is partnering
Hmm.
up with many well-known players. Last one was Lenovo. And part of their mandate is actually to look into the semiconductor space and be a champion for that sector. But also another entity
Mm.
that was created is called the National Semiconductor Hub, and it's a very actually clever positioning that they want to do. They're part of the R&D, the Innovation Authority, but basically they brought in lots of ex-semiconductor officials like Dr. Naveed from Intel and others who want to position Saudi as a neutral area for developing fabless semiconductor. So these are design companies. So NVIDIA, for example, does not fabricate their own chips. They go
Of
to
course, yeah,
TSMC,
yeah,
and
they have.
TSMC invested billions of dollars in their fabs to do that.
Exactly.
And because of geopolitics happening between West and the East, between the US and China, they see that Saudi can play a neutral role for people who want to design and
Hmm.
sell into the rest of the world and attract them to it. And they already have announced their first cohort of companies that they're supporting that want to relocate to Saudi and build here and benefit from this kind of model. And that's actually very very interesting to see because typically the very advanced stuff would not be in the region, but now we're seeing UAE, Egypt, Saudi, and other countries saying, no,
Hmm.
this is really important for us. We have the talent. Now we have the priority to make this happen, and are investing in it as well.
That's great to hear. And also, of course, I mean, energy is important in fabs and in semiconductors in general. So, if who knows, maybe one day there'll also be some fabs uh, in Saudi as well.
I just want to say
Hmm.
this, if I can. When people talk about semiconductor, I've been in the semiconductor space for some time before. They always think about the cutting edge
Hmm.
GPUs coming from NVIDIA, the H100s, the Blackwells, and so on, 2 nanometer, processes. But that's only one part of the
Yeah.
semiconductor space. If you look into your car, a lot
Exactly.
of the costs in the car, for example, or in the TV or in your appliance,
Hmm.
are actually also chips, but they're
Absolutely.
not the
Yep.
leading edge, what they call the leading edge technology. They are much cheaper to build, and they require more efficiency than effectiveness. And this is something that MENA can actually come in and be well positioned as a player. Malaysia did this before. I think we
Yeah.
can do it as well, and then develop the those capabilities so you can actually also compete on the leading edge technologies as well. But my issue when we talk about these types of investments is a lot of people, point to the leading example and say either we beat them now or we don't do this forever, and they forget that it actually took a long time. Look how long Nvidia, it took for Nvidia to be the
Exactly.
kind of player today. And you have to have that
Exactly.
kind of long-term view. VC is about long-term. If you're short-term, then go to the stock
A
market,
gradual thing.
do whatever you want to do. That's a good place for short-term investments. But if you're thinking long-term, this is where this is actually the more reasonable bet to make,
Absolutely.
rather than something that's going to be obsolete in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And sometimes the more low tech part of the market also has very interesting opportunities. Like Grok, the Grok with a Q, not with a K, not Elon's Grok, the other Grok is building inference CPUs, and it's using technology that's one generation behind in terms of etching. It's not the most precise etching, but that's fine because all it needs CPUs for inference, and that's okay for them to use. So there are sometimes uses also that you can be the best fit for in terms of ROI.
For Grok, for example, they're partnering now with Aramco Digital, and they just announced
Mm.
last week doing a $1.5 billion investment. So
Nice.
Saudi will be building a data center where you can do inference utilizing Grok
Oh yes,
technology
yes.
from the whole
They
region.
announced. I forgot. Jonathan
Yep.
Gross announced it. Yes.
So I think there's a big opportunity there, and because MENA
Yeah.
can now think global. One part of the announcement was for the data centers that are being built in Saudi. They're taking into consideration, what kind of regulation should we have for data that is living in a
Mm.
cloud
Local
that is
components.
Saudi, right? How do we become positioned so
Mm.
that we can serve all the countries around us? And one of the announcements was we can actually serve at least 40 countries if we have the right technology and the data regulation for it. So one of the things that happened in Saudi
Mm.
a year and a half ago was the launch of the cloud special free zone. And this is where,
Mm,
clients from outside of Saudi can guarantee the confidentiality and sovereignty of the data, because it's a free zone that has a special configuration that allows for technology being built here, or the infrastructure that is being built here, to serve other countries without having sovereignty or confidentiality or privacy
mm.
concerns. And I think that's a very smart move to make as well.
Yeah, it is. So I mean that's great. And let me ask you like another question related to investment. What's the quickest investment decision you ever made?
Hmm. Love from first sight.
Yeah, exactly. When did you fall in love? You have to. I hope. I mean, I
which
don't know if you're
was
married, but if you're married, I hope your wife isn't listening to this.
um, I can't remember something that we invested in directly. We typically, because of its early stage, we really
Uh huh.
put a lot of emphasis on getting to know the team, and that takes some
Mm,
time for us. But that's
yeah.
and so we developed what we call the pre-work. That's I think a term that a lot of people use. The pre-work means
Hmm.
for me to be fast and beat everyone else when a round happens. I need to do some pre-work months, if not years before, with the founder, with
Yeah.
the market, understanding the landscape, understanding what kind of playbook is going to emerge that
Hmm.
uh, I want to bet on, and who are those founders that are going to be building there, and establish a good relationship with them early on, so that when they actually are ready to invest, that we will become the fastest investors. So, for example, one of our
Got it.
star companies in our portfolio, Muzun, I've already known two of the co-founders for a very long time, years, I would say, and
Mm,
we only invested in their Series A because we were waiting for them to get to the point where we can build conviction that the model that they arrived at actually is venture scalable. So I would say we're slow, but to mitigate that slowness, we do pre-work where we reach out and build those relationships very early on, so that we appear like we're fast, but actually we took longer than everyone else.
yeah. Yeah, that's wise. So, I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and change something about the regional ecosystem tomorrow, what would it be?
I would say it's more about self confidence. That the very nature of
Mm,
technology, it's very democratizing, and that
right.
we can compete on a global level. There's nothing inherently limiting in the capabilities that we have to do that. Yes, there are lots of policies that need to be implemented, lots of deregulation that needs to happen, new capital that needs to be made, but then you always get into the egg and chicken problem. If I can go back
Yeah.
to the example of SpaceX, the regulation at the time didn't allow for what they want to do with NASA in terms of procurement. A lot
Hmm.
of the regulation, they had to fight for, and
Yep.
this is where the role of communities is very paramount. And I
Mm,
think we need to see more community activity, more grassroots collaboration between the different founders, stakeholders, funds, so that we can, proactively shape the ecosystem instead of reacting to what kind of opportunities exist today. At the end, if for a founder, you're supposed to be irrational, you're supposed to
yep.
be, impatient, and that irrationality and patience needs to be translated into a more proactive, push of what we need to do. If you build it,
Yeah.
actually the things that you think are barriers will fall much faster than you think. A lot of people, think that it's not rational. That's okay, because that's not for them. And I'll end this with a saying from one of the well-known, investors in the U.S. as well. But they say, the pessimist will always appear smart because 10 times you're right. The outlier is only 1 out of 10, but people who actually make fortunes are the optimists. So you don't care if 9 out of 10 fail. You want that one. If it succeeds, then the magnitude is super crazy, exponential, and that's what you care about.
So I love that note of optimism and ambition. And I could talk to you all day, Waleed. But since this is a good point, I think, to start asking the closing questions, as I've taken so much of your time already. So the first question is, what book or books do you like to recommend to others?
Um, I don't really have a favorite book, to be honest. I like reading multiple things.
Hmm.
But one book that I can recommend is The Rainforest. It's a very old book, at least 10 years old. But the authors did a really good job of trying to deconstruct what's so special about Silicon Valley and why other ecosystems, even in the U.S.,
Mm,
failed to emulate its success. And they didn't end up with an answer, but the process, the journey itself, was very insightful. And I
mm.
think we can learn a lot of lessons from the work they did. It's still very relevant today.
Interesting. Okay, second question. I mean, how do you relax? How do you unwind? How do you stay energized?
Well, doing different things, right? My colleague Marvin Lau likes to say, we like to eat like lions rather than like cows. So lions, they hunt their prey and have a
Yeah,
big chunk meal that lasts them for a few days or week even, whereas cows are constantly eating. So
yeah.
I'm really a big believer in, when you're working on something, you put all your effort, get it done, and make amazing results out of it, and then
Hmm.
you know take it some lower intensity kind
Stepping
of
back.
work. Yes,
Yeah.
I like to exercise. I like to read. I like to socialize. I like to travel, do different things. I like, focus is sometimes hard for me because I like to do different things, but
Hmm.
have that balance at the end. But I think where a lot of people get in trouble is their definition of how balance looks like is wrong. Work-life balance doesn't mean that you end your work at 5 p.m. Work-life balance is very different, and at least for me. And I do
Hmm.
care about quality time with the family, with doing other stuff than investment. I'm very active on the community level with many communities already co-founded that
Hmm.
I participated in. But the distribution of time looks very different than the 9 to 5 work than 5 p.m. to whatever non-work. No, that's not how I think about it. It's not if you're watching the TV show on Apple, Severance.
No, I haven't
It's
seen it.
okay, highly recommended. I think they're now in a new season, but
Uh huh.
I think it's a very fascinating take on work-life balance and all the issues around it. It's a sci-fi
Hmm.
show, by the way.
Interesting. Okay, I'll check it out. All right, and before I ask the final kind of question, is there a place you like that's it's the right place for people to reach you if they're they want to reach out for any reason, or any website or something you want to point them to before we wind down?
Yeah, it can be reached in multiple ways. I'm active on Twitter. You can
Hmm.
reach me there. On our website, suknaventures.com, we have a link for receiving
Hmm.
investment pitches, pitch decks, and so on.
Yep.
And you'll see me in communities. The best way to get more time with me is to find me in one of the communities that I participate in. And if I see you, putting time for the community and doing non-zero sum kind of activities, I'm a sucker for
Hmm.
that, and you'll definitely seeing paying more attention.
Yeah, you gave everyone the trick to it.
There you go.
There you go. All right. So I like to close on a note of gratitude. So, what is a gift somebody has given you that has had a large impact on your life?
That's a tough one. All the success I had is, after, blessing of God, is through a lot of the people who helped me throughout my journey. My parents had a big impact on me. When I got into computer science, for example, at the time, it wasn't as popular as it is today. Everyone thought,
Hmm.
what is computer science? Why would someone even go there? Is it this? Are you just doing data entry, or what's happening? And they faced a lot of pressure, but they actually believed me and supported me through that journey, and a lot of other things. My wife also, she spent so many years with me away from her family, and we had kids while I was at Microsoft, and I wasn't helping much. And we came back, and I'm still making big risks that impact all of us. And she's still, supportive. All the teachers that opened my eyes into how I should think, how I should act, and what kind of value systems I should think about. I'm generally grateful for everyone around me, and
Yeah,
it's a team sport, right? And I try to give back, and knowing that I didn't reach where I am without the help of people, so I should be paying it forward as well.
absolutely. That's wonderful. It's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you for paying it forward with sharing your knowledge today as well. And happy to have hosted you, Waleed.
I enjoyed this a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Waleed.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali's Whale.